Good morning, good afternoon, or good night. Depends on where you are. So my name is Flávia Castelhano. I am a researcher and activist for menstrual rights, and my field of research focus is mainly in Latin America, especially in Brazil. So I defended my master's degree on the topic, and I founded the Coalition for Menstrual Dignity and also the Observatory for Menstrual Dignity. So my presentation today will tell you very briefly about how the topic of menstrual dignity was formed in Brazil until the federal law in 2022. So before, here we go. So before to start to talk about the elements, I'd like to explain very briefly about the methodology. So this research was anchored in a bibliographical research, especially international materials, since the scientific production in Brazil is still very low. Also documentary analysis and also 15 semi-structured interviews. The objective of this research was to understand the main elements that contributed to raising the issue of menstrual dignity to the governmental agenda in 2021, because it was very unknown until that moment. So here about the highlights and finds in this research. So we identified some elements that I would say that were determinant in the process to straight this process and make society talk about menstrual dignity. So the first one I'd like to highlight is the data produced about the issue. So UNFPA, the Fund for Population, UNICEF, and PAG, Procter & Gamble, they produced data about Brazil that this data reached the media, the newspapers, and began to be systematically repeated over and over. So 1 in 4 girls has already missed class due to the lack of conditions to carry menstrual management. 713,000 girls do not have bathrooms in their homes. So we understood in this research that the data was essential to give the dimension of the problem in Brazil. Also, we found the power, we knew already, but we've now proved the power of communication. So the documentary Period, End of Sentence inspired the first project here in Brazil in the city of Rio de Janeiro. So a counselor watched the documentary and realized that maybe it was a situation happening also in the city of Rio. And he elaborated a local bill for the cause. After that, a national program on Sundays in a very prime time was presented about period and menstrual poverty, which make Google research register the first peak for the finds for the search online. So after this national program, Google registered the first peak for menstrual dignity and menstrual poverty. And also about communication, the power of communication. So a newspaper that publicized content about the local law from Rio de Janeiro inspired the national law from the federal government. After that, another point to be highlighted is the strategies for constructing narratives, because considering at that moment, but also still now, we have a very right-wing or extreme right-wing Congress, and due to this situation, some discussions were deliberately avoided. For example, the debate of gender. It was a way to try to discuss this with a broad group of people. So the parliamentarians involved, they choose to talk about health and education rather than gender due to the difficult to discuss in a very right-wing Congress composed. Also, something very interesting about this condition in Brazil was the allies for the cause. So it was built some specific alliance and a specific and temporary alliance even with parliamentarians from the government, from allies from the government, working in the base of the government, they were together to support this project, because in a very broad way, they understood that we were talking about dignity and human rights and not about a cause from the left or from the right or from gender or feminists or whatever. And finally, one of very interesting things that happened was about when the ex-president vetoed the project for the first time. Was an event that elevated the issue in a very national way and interesting, and then gained the issue gained popularity, had support from influencers, from opinion makers. And at that moment, as you can see here in the picture, Google registered the second peak of search online right after, exactly the same day, and the day after the ex-president vetoed the project for menstrual dignity. So I was very brief, but so this was some of the strategic, political, alliance and production of scientific data that was necessary, fundamental to build the agenda here in Brazil. Thank you.